There's something very, very wrong in the gaming industry, particularly, I should say, in the AAA gaming industry right now. This is something that has slowly crept up on us over the last, I would say, 10 years, since the beginning of the PS4 generation. The PS4 just turned 10 years old today. Can you imagine that? 10 years ago, the PS4 launched. Something has been going very, very wrong, and you can draw a parallel between the games industry and Hollywood, because Hollywood has been going this same route for a very long time. What is happening here is because of money. It's all about money. These studios are focusing on known IPs, things that are guaranteed cash cows, and they're spending ridiculous amounts of money, time, and manpower to bring these gargantuan games to full realization. And we've seen this over and over and over again with games launching in the last, especially 3 or 4 years, from the end of the PS4 life cycle into the PS5 life cycle. Of course, this applies to the Xbox platform as well. I use Sony as an example heavily here in this video because I'm most familiar with the Sony library. But you got to take a look back, not very far, but if you look back to the PS3 generation, that's the 7th generation, and even a little bit to the 6th generation with the PS2, and of course the Xbox, and looking towards, the 7th generation with the 360, so many things were so different back then, and we don't really think about how great things were back then. The 7th generation was kind of the pinnacle of gaming, if you will, in my opinion. I mean, other people would argue, the 16-bit era or the PS1 with all its great RPGs and stuff. But if you look at the intersection of pretty darn good graphics, getting into HD graphics with 720p on most PS3 games, and occasionally 1080i or 1080p, depending on how you hooked it up and how the game was made, you're getting pretty good graphics in the 7th generation, stuff that still holds up pretty well today. I mean, it doesn't look fantastic on a 4K TV, but it holds up. And you're looking at performance on those consoles that generally the performance is actually what you would expect it to be. Games are running fairly well. We get more games in the 7th generation that actually gave us 60 frames per second than we do now on the PS5. It's actually kind of ludicrous. We have all of this horsepower, and yet still games are launching, running like garbage. We just had Forspoken from Square Enix released this week. Forspoken, I'm going to reserve judgment on whether or not it's a good game, but we know for damn sure that there are problems with Forspoken. Performance issues. It's got several different performance modes that you can choose from. But, the best looking mode, you're looking at 20 frames a second in a lot of parts of that game, according to Digital Foundry. And that's just not okay. Why are these developers developing these games to push the hardware so hard, or they're just so poorly optimized that they cannot give us even 30 frames a second, depending on which mode you choose. But if you look back, just take a look back in the time machine with me here to the PS3 generation. What we can observe, look at something like BioWare, for example. Mass Effect 1, Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3, Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2. There was another Dragon Age game in there too, Awakening or something like that. 3 Mass Effect games, 3 Dragon Age games. I don't think BioWare actually made all of the Dragon Age games. But, unbelievable output from these games. Activision, 9 Call of Duty games on the PS3. If you count Black Ops 3, which was only multiplayer on the PS3, that's 10. 10 games on the PS3 from one developer. Well, I guess it's 3 studios, at Activision that are working on these games. So it's still 3 games per studio at least. Square Enix, we had Final Fantasy 13, 13-2, and Lightning Returns. Now, say what you will about whether you enjoy some of those games, but those were AAA games. 3 of them from one studio, and we also got remakes from Square Enix. We got Kingdom Hearts remakes. We got Final Fantasy X and X-2 remake. Incredible output from some of these studios. There's so many more examples. You look on the Xbox, we got Gears of War 1, 2, and 3. Just unbelievable output from some of these studios. And today, a recent tweet that I heard, I don't know if it was from Jez Corden, maybe. I can't remember who made the tweet, but it was just a couple of weeks ago. If a studio starts developing right now, they have an idea and they want to start developing a game right now, they would be developing it for the PS6. Like, we all think of the PS5 as a pretty new console. Most people don't even have one yet. Of course, it's coming up on 3 years since the PS5 launched, which is crazy to think about. But can you imagine, a console's only 2 years, and if a development company starts today, they're probably not developing for the PS5. This is a pandemic. This is a crazy situation where development cycles for games and the budget for games is ballooning out of control. It's absolutely crazy, and Hollywood is going the same way. We're seeing these tentpole movies, like your Marvel movies, like your Avatars and stuff like that, where they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of developers working on these projects for 5, 6, 7 years. Unbelievable. And you know what? That wouldn't be so bad if these games were launching and they were amazing. But time after time after time, these games are launching a broken, buggy mess, missing content. Looking at you, Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite launches. It's a shadow of Halo's former glory. It's missing all kinds of modes. It only had multiplayer at launch, and the multiplayer was stripped down. It didn't have half the modes that people want. It didn't have Forge. It didn't have so many things that make Halo Halo. We had to wait a year to get the campaign for Halo, and that campaign didn't have couch co-op. Like, can you imagine? Like, Halo is known for its great couch co-op, and it just didn't happen. They had to cancel it. Like, what is going on in this industry where we can look at something only 12, 13, 14 years ago on the PS3? Let's not even talk about the PS2, but look at, say, Rockstar, for example. On the PS3, we got Grand Theft Auto 4 and Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption, plus some other stuff. Like, 3 major games in one generation.
Plus, I just thought, too, let's not even forget about Naughty Dog. Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, plus introducing us to the Last of Us franchise in one generation.
Since then, what has Rockstar done? Really, what have they done? Like nothing. All through the PS4 generation, what did we get? We got Red Dead 2. Great. That's it. We got more and more content for Grand Theft Auto 5. Like, this is becoming a meme at this point. Like, Grand Theft Auto 5 has been going and going and going for like 10 years. More than 10 years. It's ridiculous. And is it a good game? Do people like to play it? Is it one of the most best-selling games of all time? Sure. But is it necessary? Do we as gamers even want this? Do we want these huge, epic games like Cyberpunk 2077, for example? Like, as compared to, I digress here. I think this is why the indie scene is getting so much love and attention these days, because what you've got is a small, streamlined group of people, one developer, or maybe 10 or 12 developers working on something like Shovel Knight, or Hollow Knight, or Hades, or something. You've got a small, compact, fast and loose group of people that are putting out incredible games, fantastic games, in a couple of years and moving on. We've seen so many of these super successful indie games, and that's the reason, because these AAA studios have lost sight of what gamers actually want. We do not want more bland open world experiences that take 100 hours to complete. Looking at you, Assassin's Creed, ad nauseum, looking at you, Ubisoft games, over and over and over again with the same, situation, just these open world tentpole games with virtually nothing to do.
I'd love to know how many of you down in the comments below. Let me know if you are among the, I think, majority of gamers who would prefer a compact single-player experience, such as a lot of the indie games that we have had. Something where you can pick it up, play it in 20 or 30 or however many hours, and be done with it.
We need to take a step back in the gaming industry. We need to let these developers know we don't want these massive, especially these always online multiplayer games. Like, a lot of people do like multiplayer, but it seems to me like every studio wants to create their own Fortnite or their own Overwatch or whatever, and that's all they're focused on, is getting the engagement, getting the eyeballs on these games, and having, thousands, millions of people staying in one ecosystem for hundreds or thousands of hours. And a lot of gamers don't want that. And this is why Nintendo has been so, nobody's talking about this. Nintendo has been so successful this generation because they have stuck with the core of single player gamers. We see so many of these games come out and they do 2 or 3 million in sales, something like a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 or 3, something like a Bayonetta, something like a Metroid, where these people can, us as gamers, we can step into a game, enjoy it for 20, 30, 50, 100 hours, whatever, and then it's done. And there's no expectation for these games to sell 30 or 40 million copies to be successful. They can put out something that is a little more reasonable in scope in the first place, spend a whole lot less money on it, and be happy with selling 2 or 3 or 4 million copies. This needs to have more attention out there on social media. We need to be thinking about this. We need to be talking about this. We need to be telling these developers that they are heading down the wrong path, because spending $200 million on a game that's going to be a complete flop is a disaster. It's an absolute disaster for the industry, because they are only interested in billions these days. A game that sells 3 million copies to them is a failure. And many, many, many of us would not consider something like a Metroid or a Bayonetta to be a failure. We think those are great games. Sure, did they have some performance issues on the Switch? Yeah, of course. But these are still great, great games that are honestly more memorable than a lot of these huge AAA, always online games that you can think of. So, I don't know, guys, let me know down in the comments what you think about this, but what can we do amongst social media to let these developers know that they are heading down the wrong path? And I think we're heading for disaster. We're heading for a future where we're only getting one game per generation from a lot of our favorite developers. And that's not okay to me. That's not okay. Let me know down in the comments, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Stay classy.